So if you look at the automotive landscape right now, your dealership's biggest threat, it really isn't the broader economy.
Oh, no, definitely not.
And honestly, it isn't the competitor across the street either. The rules of survival are, well, they're actively being rewritten from the inside out.
Completely rewritten.
Yeah. So, welcome to Auto News Talk. Because if you've been feeling like, every single part of your business is undergoing this massive stress test simultaneously,
Oh, you are definitely not imagining it.
you are not. It's very real.
It really is. I mean, it's the definition of a high-stakes environment. And to protect a dealership's enterprise value moving forward, we really have to look past the obvious metrics.
Right. The stuff everyone normally looks at.
Exactly. We need to map the terrain of the hidden mechanics of the business. And that means looking at, who is actually at the wheel running the store.
Okay.
And how your digital doors are functioning behind the scenes. Plus, how these massive structural shifts in the used electric vehicle market are creating, completely unexpected margin windows.
So, you're saying the metal on the lot matters, obviously, but the internal machinery matters more.
Much more.
Let's actually start right there with who is at the wheel. Because there's this one industry analysis on operations that points out that early succession planning is, it's essentially the ultimate shield for enterprise value.
It is.
And I think a lot of owners assume succession is just, handing over the keys when you retire.
And that assumption is exactly what destroys value.
Really? Just that assumption?
Yeah. I mean, the analysis makes a really compelling case that waiting for a health or financial crisis to force your hand, it completely compresses your choices.
Oh, I see.
Right. It spikes the stress for everyone involved, and it leads to reactive scrambling rather than, a strategic transition.
Which makes sense. But, why do so many smart, successful operators fall into that exact trap?
Because the transition from being the primary decision maker to stepping back as a mentor is deeply personally challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You've built this business, right? Your
Yeah.
entire identity is tied to it. The analysis actually notes that humility, the willingness to accept that you need to keep learning and eventually step aside, is often what separates merely good operators from truly great ones.
It's the classic founder's dilemma, really.
Exactly.
But the other side of that coin is the skill gap, right?
Yeah.
Because the older guard might know exactly how to work a showroom floor, but the next generation brings these vital, modern retail disciplines.
Spot on.
I'm talking about, advanced e-commerce execution and hardcore data analytics.
Which are no longer optional, by the way. But here is the detail from that analysis that really stood out to me.
What's that?
Alignment around shared values matters far more than lineage. A last name is not a prerequisite for a trusted successor.
Oh, wow. That is a crucial point.
Right.
And if you're listening to this and you don't have a kid who wants to take over the family business, you can still secure your legacy.
Absolutely. You can elevate a trusted longtime operator or even bring in an equity partner.
And the implication of doing this proactively is massive, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it safeguards the dealership's legacy, sure, but it also guarantees the stability of your employees.
Right. They need to know their jobs are safe.
Exactly. And most importantly, it secures your critical lender relationships. Because lenders, they hate uncertainty.
They really do.
If they don't know who's going to be running the store next, your cost of capital just goes straight up.
What this analysis doesn't actually answer, though, is the exact legal, tax, or estate structuring steps required to execute this successfully.
Yeah, that's true. It leaves that pretty open.
Because every state, every country, and honestly, every family situation is going to require fully customized legal frameworks.
For sure.
Yeah.
But getting that internal leadership locked down prepares you for the external threats.
That's a good point.
Because you need a solid team in place to handle regulatory earthquakes.
That is a critical pivot right there. Good succession means you actually have the bandwidth to deal with compliance shocks. And I was looking at this briefing specifically focused on UK market regulations, and it details a massive shock on the horizon. The Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA, is instituting this formal compensation scheme to handle historic motor finance complaints.
Yeah, that is a huge deal.
Okay, let's break this down for a second. What does a formal compensation scheme actually look like on the ground for a dealer?
Well, it's essentially the government stepping in to say, look, we need an orderly, consistent way to deal with complaints about how cars were financed.
Okay.
The briefing outlines a few major shifts. First, The FCA is standardizing exactly how complaints and compensation are calculated, basically taking all the guesswork out of it.
Makes sense.
Second, they're mandating an implementation period for firms to dig through and assess all their historic agreements.
All their historic agreements, I mean, that sounds like an administrative nightmare.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
Which leads to the third point. The goal is to create a simplified experience for consumers with very clear escalation routes if they feel they were overcharged or, misled.
Right.
And fourth, because the burden on dealers is just so heavy here, trade bodies like the National Franchise Dealers Association, the NFDA, are having to actively step in to support dealers just to keep them compliant.
I want to give everyone a sense of the financial scale of this because the briefing drops a very sobering detail.
Oh, the reserve fund.
Yeah. Udall Financial Services has already proactively set aside £12.8 million in anticipation of the scheme.
Wow.
Nearly £13 million just sitting in reserve, bracing for impact.
That really tells you everything you need to know about the perceived risk, doesn't it?
It really does.
The implication here is that this forces dealers to completely standardize their operations. You have to align your finance and insurance processes, your F&I, and drastically tighten up your historic record keeping.
And if you don't,
you are facing massive backlogs and potential penalties.
So what this framework overview doesn't answer is the exact final rules, or, honestly, the specific financial toll this will take on individual, smaller dealers who don't have millions in reserve.
Right, the smaller guys are left guessing a bit.
Trying to handle a leadership change while the regulators rewrite the rules of finance is it's like trying to rebuild an engine while the car is driving down the highway.
That's a great way to put it.
If you unbolt the wrong piece of your F&I process right now, the whole business stalls.
It's a highly functional way to look at it. The mechanics of your compliance have to be pristine. But, let's take that a step further.
Okay.
You can have a brilliant successor in place, and your compliance can be absolutely bulletproof. But none of that enterprise value matters if the customer gets frustrated and leaves before they even see a car.
Ah, you're talking about the digital front door.
I am. There's this fascinating technical study covered by Digital Dealer, and it breaks down how slower mobile dealership websites are severely depressing sales opportunities.
Interesting.
And it gets into the actual plumbing of how these sites work.
I have to admit, when I first looked at this study, I was a little confused. I mean, we spend thousands of dollars a month on these digital storefronts. How can they be failing so badly?
Because of how they are built, really. The study makes a few undeniable points. First, mobile speed directly correlates with your organic visibility and traffic.
Right.
If your site is slow, Google essentially hides it. Second, dealers desperately need to baseline what are called their core web vitals and eliminate render blocking resources.
Okay, stop right there. Render blocking resources. For those of us who don't write code, what does that actually mean in plain English?
Fair question. Think of render blocking like a bouncer at the front door of your website.
Okay, bouncer.
A customer clicks your link and they want to see the inventory, but the bouncer says, hold on, I need to check this incredibly long VIP list of background scripts before I open the door.
Oh, I see.
That list is your heavy JavaScript, your third-party tracking tags, and, massive uncompressed hero media images on the homepage.
Ah, the giant rotating banner image of the dealership that takes 10 seconds to load.
Precisely. The browser has to download all of that before it can show the customer a single car.
Which is terrible for the user experience.
Exactly. The study points out that when you speed this up, it amplifies all your downstream performance. A faster site mathematically equals more inventory views and more lead submissions.
The stat from this study that absolutely floored me is that an astonishing 92% of local dealership domains fail Google's mobile performance requirements.
It's wild.
92%. And it really matters because the #1 search result gets roughly 22 times more traffic than the 10th.
So the implication is that technical speed is a massive controllable profitability lever.
Huge.
You can multiply your qualified organic traffic without adding a single dollar to your ad budget, just by firing that inefficient bouncer and fixing your website's architecture.
Now, I do want to note a limitation here. What this study doesn't really answer is the exact line between correlation and causation.
That's true.
Because, after all, your physical proximity to the searcher, your content quality, and your local reviews still heavily influence rankings alongside speed.
Oh, absolutely. It's a mix.
But I want to push back on the premise here for a second. If you're listening to this and thinking, look, I have no control over my website's APIs or my chat widgets because my manufacturer forces me to use them, You're not wrong, right? I mean, how is this the dealer's fault?
It's a very fair pushback. Dealers are often heavily beholden to OEM-mandated tools. But you aren't entirely powerless.
What can they do?
Well, the solution isn't to just delete the mandated chat widget. The solution is an aggressive technical audit to tame those tags.
Tame them how?
You work with your web provider to defer them, meaning you tell the browser, load the cars first and load the chat widget only after the customer actually starts scrolling. You have to actively manage that digital friction.
Okay, so let's assume you've done that. You've audited the site, the bouncer is fired, and the customer gets through your fast-loading digital door without bouncing. What inventory are they actually looking for right now? Because according to a marketplace breakdown from The Drive, we are seeing a massive structural shift in the used vehicle market.
We really are. The central insight from the Drive's breakdown is that used EV prices are finally stabilizing and finding a floor.
Which is a huge deal.
It is. And that new, lower pricing floor is actively pulling budget-conscious shoppers toward late-model EVs over comparable gas cars.
Which is a wild reversal. I mean, for a long time, EVs were only for early adopters with deep pockets. Why the sudden shift?
Well, the breakdown points to the mechanics of the market. First, prices reset heavily due to two factors: massive fleet sell-downs and a rapid technology cadence.
Okay.
Think about it like smartphones. A 3-year-old smartphone feels sluggish because the tech moves so fast. Early EVs suffered the same steep depreciation because battery tech was improving so rapidly.
And then the rental fleets just dumped all their inventory.
Right, exactly. But second, the data shows we are now seeing a genuine price recovery. The latest figures from the Manheim Index show EV values are actually up 6.7% year over year.
That's a solid bump.
Third, higher pump prices are really sharpening the value case for the everyday commuter. And fourth, the used EV inventory is finally broadening out. It's no longer just early short-range compliance cars.
Right.
There are actual SUVs and trucks hitting the secondary market now.
Here is the detail from the breakdown that I think completely changes the sales pitch on the showroom floor.
What's that?
Under the $20,000 mark, the average used EV is roughly 2 years newer and carries about 40,000 fewer miles than a gas car at the exact same price.
Wow.
Plus, Hertz flooding the market with over 30,000 EVs really helped set this new, accessible pricing floor.
I mean, getting a car with 40,000 fewer miles for the same price, that is a huge psychological trigger for a buyer.
It really is.
The implication for dealers is crystal clear. This creates a near-term margin window. You have the potential for much faster lot turns as the affordability equation suddenly flips in favor of the consumer.
However, what this market overview doesn't answer is how uneven regional charging infrastructure and shifting policy incentives will cap this demand geographically.
Yeah, that's the big asterisk.
Because the math works beautifully, but a great deal on a low-mileage EV doesn't actually matter if you live in an apartment complex in a rural area with literally nowhere to plug it in.
That is the persistent friction point for passenger EVs, for sure. The geography has to support the math.
Exactly.
But I think looking at the commercial side actually gives us a clearer picture of where the overall market is heading.
Really? How so?
Well, looking at wholesale auction data from Manheim, the central insight is that used electric van volumes and average selling prices are experiencing a massive surge right now.
I always look at the commercial buyers as the leading indicator.
Why is that?
Because they are completely ruthless about return on investment. They don't buy on emotion or environmental idealism. They buy on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. And the Manheim data highlights 4 key drivers for this commercial surge. 1, younger, lower mileage stock is entering the auction lanes, which drastically reduces expected reconditioning costs for the buyer.
Makes sense.
2, commercial fleets now have a much better understanding of battery performance and running costs. The whole mystery of how long will this battery last is largely gone.
Because they have real-world data now to back it up.
Yes, exactly. 3, newer model cycles are simply better vehicles. They are improving product quality across the board. And 4, wider industry awareness of these lower running costs is just intensifying the bidding in the wholesale lanes.
The standout detail from this auction data is incredible, by the way. At UK auctions, used EV van volumes jumped 74%, while average selling prices simultaneously rose 33% to nearly £10,000.
It's amazing.
Volume and price going up at the exact same time is practically unheard of in a normal depreciation cycle.
It really is the ultimate proof of an active, hungry market. The implication here is that for consignors and dealers, this combination proves wholesale demand is robust.
Right.
And when wholesale is strong, it allows you to confidently firm up your retail pricing on the lot. You don't have to race to the bottom anymore.
The one thing this auction data doesn't answer, though, is the breakdown of these results by specific van models or seller types, which honestly would be pretty helpful for sourcing.
Yeah, that level of granularity is missing.
But taking a step back from all of this, it feels like the used EV market is finally having its Goldilocks moment, you know? They aren't too expensive for the average buyer anymore, but they aren't so old that the battery technology is obsolete.
It's a really fascinating convergence. And if we look at the entire terrain we've just mapped, from who runs the store to the website code to the electric vans on the lot, I think there are some very clear themes that emerge.
Oh, absolutely. To me, the most glaring theme connecting all of this is the hidden cost of friction.
How do you mean?
Well, we see it in the FCA source, right? Where friction in consumer finance complaints leads to massive regulatory crackdowns and £12.8 million reserve funds.
Right.
But we also see it in the page speed source, where friction in the digital shopping experience, that render blocking bouncer we talked about, literally chases buyers away before they see a single piece of inventory.
That's a great point. Friction is silent, but it is incredibly expensive.
Very expensive.
Another major theme here is the undeniable power of proactive preparation. We saw this explicitly supported by both the succession planning analysis and the FCA redress framework.
Oh, for sure.
In both of those scenarios, waiting for a crisis, whether it's an internal founder stepping down or an external regulator stepping in, destroys your enterprise value. You have to build the shield before the battle starts.
And I think the third theme has to be market normalization. Both of the EV sources. The Drive's data on passenger cars and Mannheim's data on electric vans really highlight that once a pricing floor is established and the technology mystery is removed, buyer confidence returns and the volume actually starts moving.
But we also have to acknowledge the contradictions in this data, right?
Yeah.
Because dealerships are navigating some serious tensions.
Like what?
The first is what I call the digital paradox. If you explicitly contrast the EV sources with the page speed source, you have dealerships desperately trying to sell highly advanced modern technology.
Right, these EVs with incredible software.
Exactly, EVs with advanced battery management systems. Yet 92% of them are trying to sell this futuristic tech on websites that fail basic modern digital infrastructure tests.
It's a total mismatch. I mean, you're trying to sell a spaceship using a dial-up modem.
Pretty life.
It breaks consumer trust instantly. And I'd say the second tension is the battle between affordability and infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a big one.
If you contrast the incredible bargain data in the EV market sources getting a car 2 years newer with 40,000 fewer miles against the reality of regional charging, it's tough. The used EV is finally affordable, but the infrastructure still dictates who can actually take advantage of those deals.
So synthesizing all of this, the practical takeaway for the listener is clear. You have to stop relying on heavy ad spend and just hoping the market works itself out.
Right. Hope is not a strategy.
No, it isn't. You need to take control of your controllable assets immediately. You need to audit your mobile site speed and defer those heavy tags.
Yeah.
You need to document your F&I compliance processes before the regulators mandate it. And honestly, you need to align your leadership team right now.
Which brings us to the end of this segment of Auto News Talk. The most successful dealerships going forward won't just be the ones selling the right metal. They'll be the ones with the right mechanics, digital, regulatory, and organizational.
You really have to build a machine that can withstand the repaving of the track.
Exactly. So, before you jump into your next meeting, I have a quick challenge for you. Pull out your smartphone, open a cellular connection, not your dealership's high-speed Wi-Fi, but cellular load your own website, and honestly ask yourself, would you wait around for this to load? Thanks for joining us on Auto News Talk. We'll catch you next time.